Hi everyone, Adrian from Audio Excellence Canada, my friend Vilip, Angus behind the controls along with his friend Alex. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are going to talk about the McIntosh C12000 tube/solid state preamp. This thing is amazing in terms of its features. If you haven't seen it already, Angus is going to link the video of the unboxing and the basic setup of this particular preamplifier. So I'm going to go through some of the basic features and then we'll get to it. So first of all, this is a 2-channel solid state and tube preamplifier. Literally 2 preamps in one. Separate audio and control sections. So in other words, there's a chassis or an enclosure that houses just the audio amplification, and then another one that has the controls, the power, in other words, all the dirty stuff. 12 analog inputs. By the way, no DAC built in. This is strictly analog. 12 analog inputs, including 2 configurable phono inputs. So out of the 12, you have 6 balance inputs, 4 single-ended or RCA inputs, and then 2 phono. You can either have 2 MMs, 2 MCs, 1 MM, 1 MC. They're all configurable in the phono section. I mentioned already, offers both solid state and vacuum tube output. For the tube section, it uses 2 12AT7s and 1 12AX7 per channel. So a total of 6 tubes for the line stage and 4 12AX7s for the phono section. And because it's a true balanced design, when you look in the back of the preamplifier, you'll see that the left connections are all on the left side of the chassis, and then the rights are all on the right. Let's see what else is there.
It's got handles.
We'll get to it. Headphone amplifier, home theater bypass, and the sizes are 17.5 inches wide, 6 inches high, 18 inches deep. Or for the rest of the world, 44.45 centimeters wide, 15.24 centimeters high, and 45.4 centimeters deep. 52 pounds for the 2 enclosures together, or 23.6 kilograms. And it's $16,000 for the preamplifier. Okay, Vilip, take it away.
Well, you failed to mention that. Really, did you mention it? But I mean, there's 2 pieces. So, for instance, each of the pieces is so high, which means the entire stack is like
it's like an MC
foot. Like it's like 30 centimeters or like 12 inches.
I mentioned that the height.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. That's right. Sorry, that's right. He's right. It's 6 inches per enclosure.
Yes.
So it's 12 inches. Yeah.
And it has handles.
It has lovely
Which
handles.
means that it's actually much deeper than you think it is.
Well, I think I included.
Well, where it sticks out.
Yeah.
Which could get in the way.
Just get to the sound.
Vilip doesn't like the handles.
I don't like the handles.
I love the handles. They're stunning.
Now, to be fair, I've shown this unit to several of my prestigious clients. They like the handles.
See?
But I don't like them.
Well, because if you look at if you put them in a stack with McIntosh amps have the same handles, so they match.
But you can't even put your hand in it.
It's not.
They don't do anything.
Exactly. You think handles are for you to use it? Yeah, handles are there for.
We don't
us to
use
use.
the handles on any of the Macintosh stuff.
If you got tiny hands, they'll fit.
Okay, they're not rack mountable, but that's what the handles are for rack mounting, so you can slide it into the rails and put it into a wall unit.
In any of the Macintosh units that we have, do we use the handles?
Well, I make you use them when we move them.
Well, the amps you can use
But
the
they
handles.
don't do anything.
Yeah, the amps you can use the handles because they're large enough you can actually put your hand in there.
And get really uncomfortable.
Yeah, it doesn't help you carry them.
No, but it hurts your hand, so that's actually funny.
Okay, everybody, you can just fast forward to the actual audio part. Go ahead. You can fast forward that too. Angus put timestamps, and just when he starts talking about the audio part, that's when you begin.
We burned the unit in for quite some time.
Yeah, I think this is the first preamp we've actually burnt in.
Well,
Fully.
before we started listening to it.
It's been on continuously since we got it.
Well, for at least 3, 4, 5 days,
Yeah,
something like that.
continuously.
And then we really haven't really turned it off.
No.
It hasn't been plugged into anything per se, but there's definitely a signal going through it.
Yeah.
Now, this of course begs the question. I looked at the circuit diagram on top of the unit. So if you look at the top of the unit, it actually shows you how it's all configured inside. I mean, as much as I understand what all those symbols mean, but there's definitely two preamp circuits inside, one solid state, one tube. Now, the big question is obviously, are both of those active all the time? I don't know.
It appears to be, yeah. Because you can, well, anyway, go ahead.
So when we feed the signal in, there's always the debate what are you actually burning in?
No, it's definitely both, because you can play it, and I did the test this morning. And in fact, when we first got it, you can hook it up, let's say using the solid state output, and then turn the amp off, hook it up to the tube output, turn the amp back on, and it plays. So
No, there's only one set of outputs on that.
no. There's tube and solid state.
2 outputs. Actually 3 technically.
4 outputs.
So it's actually access through a control.
No. It's always on. I'm telling you.
So I never changed the outputs. You can there's a function in there.
Yes.
You can switch between the two on the control panel.
No, that's for something else. Both tube and solid state.
They sound totally different.
Yeah, you can. I believe I haven't done the menu. I've gone into the menu that deeply, but as it's configured from the factory, both tube and solid state outputs are live. So
right, but they're out of the same. In other words, you're switching internally the circuit. You switch between, and there's a hesitation. It takes about like 5 to 10 seconds for it to switch. So you change that portion of it. Anyway, you can switch back and forth, and so that's what I did. They sound really different, as far as I'm concerned. Personally, I didn't like the solid state that much. If I'd only heard that, I probably would have thought it was great. But then I heard the tube stuff, and the tube line stage portion of the preamp is quite good. My initial reaction is that, wow, it just sounds a lot like the MA12000. I don't know what you heard, but in terms of what the 12,000, the way the 12,000 is voiced, the MA12000, which we have sitting over there, because the MA12000 is quite dynamic and kind of exuberant, very joyful, big scale. And I found that the tubed output from the C12000 to be similar but more, as is the McIntosh Credo, more. A much bigger version of what's happening in the MA12000. The C12000 is a brash, bold kind of sounding preamp with lots of air, very deep sound stage, punchy, dynamic, guttural. It has a kind of rawness to it that, for instance, the C1100 wouldn't have. The C1100, for instance, sounds much more refined, almost delicate in comparison. The C12000 kind of like takes you and slaps you around, and it has big bass. And when songs like London Grammar's "Hey Now" kicks in, when the bass kicks in, the whole room is reverberating. And I was only playing at 40%. Usually I play the C1100 at much higher levels to get to the levels that I like. But with the C12000, lower levels still produce a prodigious amount of bass, even to the point of overloading the room quite easily, which you can easily tell because we were using those MC611s to drive the Yvettes that we have in the system, and you can tell how much power is, being generated from the amplifier going into the speakers. So I definitely wasn't really using any volumes that were more than what I would normally use in this kind of setup. And this 12,000 just had big slamming bass, big kicking bass. So I think they definitely changed the way this unit is voiced from the previous unit. It just seems like more old school McIntosh, just less critical, definitely more major notes than minor notes, and just with a sense of like I don't care kind of authority. It's I'm going to play this way, and you're going to like it. That's what it sounded like to me.
Maybe it's because they're coming out with the MC3500.
Oh well, we're getting one of those. But
We're getting 3 or 4 of those.
so when I played the solid state portion of it, similar but a bit more polite, flatter in terms of soundstage depth, much quieter. So the tube section seems to me a little bit noisier than definitely in the background. You can hear, I don't know, there's like an energy in the 12,000. I think that's somewhat associated with the kind of tube rush that you sometimes get with tube preamps. There's definitely a little bit of that happening in the 12,000 when you have tubed output. It's dead quiet in a solid state. It's just more polite, a little flatter, not as much air. More transparency, way more transparent, but, almost in like, because you end up A-Bing, and so the transistor part of it sounds kind of analytical in comparison to the tube part. So I didn't use the transistor part. I tried a couple different songs. I didn't really like the approach.
Very interesting. Perhaps this is the first time that in a long time that you and I will disagree.
Okay.
Very interesting. I am listening to him, and a lot of what he says I agree in terms of the findings, but quite a bit of it is very different. So when I came in this morning, I set it, I checked it, and it was set up in the solid state section. So I started listening, and I was very impressed with what I heard. So I started out with Norah Jones. I don't know why. As I was typing through Ruin, Norah Jones suggested came up, so I played Norah Jones, and the cut was let me see. Oh, one flight down, and the nearness of you. And one of the things I noticed immediately was the jump factor, the dynamics, the micro and macro dynamics were great. I was very impressed with how dynamic the sound was coming through the speakers. It didn't sound polite. I've certainly heard Norah Jones in many systems because lots of people like her music, and I was impressed with how dynamic it was. And I thought, well, let me switch over to the tube section and see. And when I switched over to the tube section, it definitely wasn't quite as dynamic, more veiled, nowhere near as transparent, nowhere near as detailed, but the imaging was spectacular, just like the solid state. The mid-range was more three-dimensional, more forward, and as Vilip pointed out, more depth. There was more separation between the front and the rear stage. So that was my first initial impressions. I was enjoying it tremendously. It's like, imagine you have 2 separate preamplifiers, one solid state, one tube, and you are playing with both to see which you like. And that was my first thoughts. It's like, wow, this is great. I'm having a lot of fun. Then I continued to listen. And as I was listening, I realized that my initial impressions were carried all the way through. I really, really liked the solid state part. But then when I listened to certain pieces of music, I gravitated more towards the tube. Let me be more specific. As I was listening, as usual, different pieces of music start popping through my head and that I want to listen to. And I decided I wanted to listen to some classical music. And just as I was thinking about what to play, a thought popped into my head. I lost 2 very dear people this year, none of them to COVID, but unfortunately this year I lost my oldest living brother, David, and Derek Hansen, my very good friend, my best friend. And suddenly occurred to me, I won't be celebrating Christmas this year with them. So David lived in England, and every Christmas clockwork, he would make sure that he sends a Christmas card to every one of his siblings. He was always very thoughtful that way. So David loved arias. He loved anything that was operatic as well as vocals. And he, in fact, when I was still very young in Singapore and he was already in England practicing his dentistry, when he came back to visit, one year he brought back a guitar. And he taught me how to play the guitar. And that was actually my first experience with the guitar. And so I was thinking about him when I decided to play some arias, and then I played John Denver. Now, he loved John Denver. John Denver's voice is, to this day, I think, one of the most beautiful. Now, Vilip doesn't like John Denver because he thinks John Denver sold out, but I think he has
I didn't even have to say it.
one of the most beautiful voices. Unfortunately, the early recordings were not great. They were dull, compressed, very opaque sounding. So when I listened to John Denver, I found that if I played it through the tubes, I didn't get as much emotional connection as when I connected to the solid state. And then suddenly I heard more detail, I heard more transparency, I enjoyed it more. On the other hand, when I was thinking about Derek loved big romantic orchestral pieces. He loved Tchaikovsky, for example. So I decided to play Tchaikovsky, violin concerto. And with the violin concerto, I preferred it with the tubes. Now, this particular recording, perhaps that might be the case. It was, let's see here. Sorry, just bear with me. With Julia Fisher. I just found that it was more emotionally engaging with the tube section than with the solid state. But to be honest, I could easily live with either. They're both to me very, very good. And then the crazy thing was, as I was listening to the tubes, as is usual, a whole bunch of other thoughts popped into my mind, like all the other tube preamps I've owned over the years. Now, Vilip probably has a list bigger than mine, but I remember the first tube preamp, the Audible Illusions that I bought, the Modulus 2. I think it was 2B. And then I started going through a list of the ones I could remember, and I started realizing, my God, I've owned a lot of tube preamps over the years, right? A lot of the Conrad Johnsons. Virtually every audio research that was worth owning. I even had the Reference 40, the 40th anniversary preamplifier. That was a very, very good preamplifier. And I would put the McIntosh easily up there with the very best of all the tube preamps I've heard. And then as far as the solid state is concerned, I think that I have to listen to it a little bit more, and I want to compare it with the D'Agostino, but I've certainly owned a lot of very, very good, great solid state preamps over the years. And I would easily put this up against the vast majority of them. But keep in mind, this thing is, relatively speaking, cheap compared to many of these crazy solid state preamps, especially today.
It still costs as much as a small car.
No, it's a lot of money. But put it this way. This is two preamps in one. It's $16,000 US. The previous one, the C1100, was $14,000. So for $2,000 more, you get another preamplifier. I think that's tremendous. I don't know how they did it. It could just be that McIntosh is big enough, they have economies of scale and so on, but I really liked it. So there you go.
There you go. I don't understand how you could hear it diametrically opposed to what I heard.
I think we heard very similar things, but I think our reactions to what we heard, like for example, you mentioned that the solid state was dynamic and transparent and detailed. I agree, but
I found the soundstage flat.
I didn't find it flat. I just didn't find it.
I heard it collapse.
No, I didn't find that at all. I didn't find it as deep as the tube section. The tube section is remarkable. But
no, I don't mean it's flat. I'm just saying it's flatter.
Yeah.
But I found the soundstage flat.
I didn't find it flat. I just didn't find it.
I heard it collapse.
Yeah. As far as the sound space, the tube is definitely deeper. By the way, I didn't also find that the tube to be as noisy as you mentioned, but I have a theory behind it. We'll test it after this video.
Well, I didn't find it noisy per se, but I could hear less blackness in the background.
Yeah.
So
but I have a theory behind that. We'll test
that?
it after this video. Well, we'll test it, and if I'm right, then we'll do a follow-up. Yeah, I think I know why that might be the case. I could be wrong. I didn't notice it. And I was listening. Oh, by the way, and I was listening for that. So one of my test cuts on my playlist for all of you that have bought our playlist. For those
and thank
of you,
you very much for doing
yes.
so. Yes.
And for those of you who haven't, if you like our playlist, it's $10 for me, $20 for Vilip. All you have to do is donate the money to your favorite charity, take a snapshot, email it to me, info@audioexcellence.ca, and we'll send you the playlist. But so on the first cut of my playlist is Cowboy Junkies,
Trinity Session.
Trinity Sessions, Mining for Gold. And right at the very start, it's recorded at a church downtown Toronto. And just as they turn on the recording, you hear this church ambience. And with the tube section, it not only pulls you in, it's almost as if the sound becomes three-dimensional. You're surrounded by this ambience, which is, with the tube section, I heard it more vividly than I've heard it before. With the solid state, I didn't get quite that impression. Yeah, so.
Well, that is one of the things, definitely with the tube output on this, you hear more ambience, more of the stuff that's going on around. I don't know why it's highlighted more so than in the transistor output.
Could just be tubes. I mean, tubes.
Yeah, definitely tubes. I mean, and what I'd regret is I never hooked up the clear audio turntable to the preamp. Maybe we can do another video about that. That's definitely something that we would want to do.
Yeah.
Since I've been begging you to buy a very good phono stage.
Well, we have the what's it called? The MP 1100. That's a fantastic phono stage. So anyway, overall for you.
Well, two gigantic, enthusiastic thumbs up.
Yeah.
It's. I won't say this a lot about McIntosh equipment because it doesn't really draw that kind of attention to itself. But sonically, this preamp is quite impressive. Like, you listen to it, either one, solid state or tubed output, it's going like, hey, hi there, how you doing? It's drawing attention to itself in a way that a lot of McIntosh doesn't do in this sonic style. It's definitely, announcing itself, I think. More so than almost any other McIntosh piece I've ever heard. It's still smooth and relaxed, but there's a bit of it saying like, I know I'm good. Just listen to me. That's my impression.
Yeah. Okay, let's do the pros and cons. So pros, in short, succinct
it's tube.
terms, it's tube. It's got solid state too, but you don't like it as much as the tube.
I like the solid state, like I said. If I just heard the solid state, I compared it to my memory of the C53, which is really, really good. And obviously this is better. But when I compared it to the tubed output, I like the tubed output better. So not to say the solid state is bad, it's just the tubed is better, in my opinion.
Any other pros?
It's got meters.
Yeah. So this is what I said. Best of both worlds. Only $2,000 more than the C1100. To me, this is an absolute bargain. If you love the C1100, you would absolutely love this, in my opinion. I love the handles and the meters. I like him. It's got tons of inputs and very configurable. All right, so let's go to cons. Negatives.
Well, it's got the handles. I'm sorry, I really don't like them.
All of you who disagree, spam him. Okay, what else?
It's physically pretty big. Yeah. People will want to maybe put it on two shelves, and it's not really designed for that because there are umbilicals on the back that are quite short, and you really can't change those.
Aren't they long enough to be able to put them on two separate stacks?
I thought you weren't supposed to stack them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not supposed to, according to the manual. But when I, we've had this connected like this, take a picture and show everybody and overlay it. But we've had it since we unboxed it like this. And periodically I'll come over and touch it, and it's very cool. And it could just be the fact that our shelving is completely open. But I think if you stack it this way, it's fine because the tubes are on the top, and that's where all the heat is. I think it's fine like that.
But you'll still see the umbilicals are a bit short, and if you have a rack like what we have, that might be too much distance. So you have to make sure the shelves are fairly close.
Okay.
I'm sure sonically it might sound a little bit better if they weren't stacked together.
So for me, there are two cons. Number one, I wish it had a Bluetooth remote, just like the D'Agostino. Once you get used to a Bluetooth remote, you won't go back because you can point it anywhere. It doesn't matter. It works, right? With an infrared remote, it's a pain in the ass. You got to aim at it, that's one thing. The other thing, as Vilip said, it's a tall stack if you stack it together. Last question. Who is this preamp for?
The lifelong McIntosh user who wants the ultimate in what McIntosh is all about. And I think even someone who is starting but has the wherewithal to be in this price category. It's just so easy to enjoy. It will span the range of users out there, but more specifically, someone who's been on the Macintosh ladder and wants to get to the pinnacle. This is it.
I like it so much. I think almost anybody who can afford it and you're looking for a preamp, you definitely should consider this. It's that good.
Well, within that category of ultimate preamps or the very best of, whatever the brand is, this is a relative bargain. It really, really, really is. You compare it. We listened to AccuPhase not that long ago. We haven't released the video yet. It's out there, or it's here somewhere. And that's much more expensive than this, and that was even the most expensive one. So, and that's kind of comparable if you think about it. But for AccuPhase, it's not even the most expensive one, and certainly with the D'Agostino, that's almost double the price, almost the progression with everything built into it.
I'll have to check. We'll put it on the video later. I can't remember offhand.
And the progression is really, really good, and this is very, very close.
I want to compare it. I think that the D'Agostino is still a bit more transparent, but I think that the solid state portion of this preamp may be more dynamic. I could be wrong. It's been a while since, I have not done the comparison, but I listened to the D'Agostino about a week ago, and when I listened to it, it sounded fabulous. Speaking of which, we now have, thankfully, the new D'Agostino M550 monoblocks, but I digress. We'll do that another time. But yeah, I really, really like this. So for the people, in my opinion, that should buy this, you definitely should look into it if you are in the market and you can afford it. And what I love about it, the build quality is spectacular. You get two preamps. I mean, again, two preamps. And as with most Macintosh products, great resale value.
It does seem to be a bit more solid than the 1100, doesn't it?
I like it.
It's a little bit heavier.
Yeah. The handles.
More solid. Probably the handles add a kind of rigidity to the entire chassis. Maybe that's why they put it in there.
All right, we got to go. We're told 2 minutes left. So please like, subscribe, turn on notification. Thank you for subscribing. We passed 20,000. Yay. And we'll see you again next time. Adrian from Audio Excellence Canada, Vilip, Angus, and Alex. Take care. Bye-bye.